The conference room in Geneva was built specifically for this moment. The ceiling stretched 30 feet high to accommodate the tall Valdrin delegates. The temperature was adjusted to their comfort. Even the chairs were custom-made to fit their unusual body structure. Earth's leaders wanted everything to be perfect for this first official meeting with the Galactic Empire. Ambassador Peter Hammond arrived early that morning. He wore a simple black suit and carried a leather briefcase. At 52 years old, he had spent 30 years in diplomatic service, but nothing had prepared him for this. He was about to meet representatives from an empire that controlled 400 star systems and had existed for 3,000 years. The Valdrin delegation arrived exactly on time. Ambassador Krelvan entered first, his pale blue skin gleaming under the lights. He stood nearly 8 feet tall with 4 arms and eyes that seemed to look in multiple directions at once. Behind him came 6 advisors, all dressed in elaborate robes covered with medals and symbols of rank. Peter stepped forward with a warm smile and extended his hand. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Krelvan. We are honored to have you here." Krelvan stopped walking. His skin shifted to a darker shade of blue. The advisors behind him made a strange hissing sound. Peter realized something was wrong, but he kept his hand extended, waiting. After a long, uncomfortable silence, Krelvan spoke. His voice came through a translator device that made it sound mechanical and cold. "You offer physical contact. This is not appropriate for first meetings between our peoples." Peter slowly lowered his hand. "I apologize. I meant no offense. It's how we greet people on Earth. We are aware of your customs. They are primitive." Krelvan moved past him and took his seat at the head of the table. The meeting began with a long presentation from Krelvan. He spoke for 2 hours without stopping. He explained that the Galactic Empire had studied humanity for the past 50 years. They had watched as humans developed faster than light travel. They had observed human colonies spreading to nearby star systems. Now it was time for humanity to join the civilized galaxy. But joining came with conditions, many conditions. The Empire would control all of humanity's trade routes. Human ships could only travel to approved systems. Human military forces would be limited to defensive purposes only. No new weapons could be developed without Imperial approval. Earth would pay an annual tribute of raw materials and technology. Human culture would be monitored to ensure it met galactic standards. Krelvan listed each requirement in detail. His advisors nodded approvingly as he spoke. They clearly expected humanity to accept everything without question. After all, they had made this same speech to 73 other species. All of them had agreed. Peter listened quietly. He took notes on his tablet. He asked a few questions for clarification but made no objections. When Krelvan finally finished, the alien leaned back in his chair with satisfaction. "These terms are standard for all new species entering the Empire. You have 1 week to provide your formal acceptance. Is this understood?" Peter was quiet for a moment. He looked down at his notes. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh. It was the kind of laugh someone makes when they hear something genuinely funny. A real, honest laugh that made his shoulders shake slightly. The Valdrin delegation froze. Krelvan's skin turned from blue to dark purple. "You find our terms amusing?" "I'm sorry," Peter said, still smiling. "It's just you've clearly done a lot of research on humanity. You know about our technology, our colonies, our military capabilities, but I think you might have missed something important." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a newspaper. It was the New York Times, printed on actual paper. The headline read, "Fusion drive test exceeds expectations. 0.7 light speed achieved." Peter unfolded the newspaper carefully and laid it on the table. He turned it so Krelvan could see the front page clearly. "This was published yesterday. Our new fusion drives are operational. We can now travel at 70% of light speed. That's faster than anything in your fleet according to our intelligence reports." Krelvan stared at the newspaper. His skin was now a deep purple color that looked almost black. "You show me this as a threat?" "Not a threat, information." Peter tapped the article with his finger. "See, the thing is, you came here expecting us to behave like all those other species you've encountered. Young civilizations that are grateful just to be noticed by the mighty Empire. Species that will accept any terms just to gain access to galactic trade and technology." He stood up and walked around the table slowly. "But humanity is different. We've been fighting each other for our entire history. We've had hundreds of nations and empires rise and fall on our own planet. We've learned a lot from all that conflict. One of the main lessons is this: never accept a deal that makes you weaker. You dare refuse the Empire? Krelvan stood as well, his forearms spread wide in what was clearly an aggressive posture. I'm not refusing anything yet, Peter replied calmly. I'm just suggesting that maybe we should negotiate as equals rather than as master and servant. You have technology and knowledge we could use. We have technology and resources you could use. Why not work together as partners? One of the Valdrin advisors spoke up in their own language. The translator device didn't activate, but Peter could tell from the tone that it was not friendly. Krelvan responded sharply, and the advisor fell silent. The Empire does not negotiate with primitives, Krelvan said. You will accept our terms or you will face the consequences. Peter picked up the newspaper and folded it carefully. He put it back in his briefcase. Ambassador, I think this meeting is over. You have 7 days to consider whether you want to treat humanity as a partner or an enemy. If you choose partnership, we'll be here ready to talk. If you choose the other option, well, we'll be ready for that too. He walked to the door, then paused and looked back. Oh, and one more thing. That newspaper you saw? We chose paper specifically for this meeting. It's old technology, sure, but sometimes the old ways work best. They're tangible, real. You can hold them in your hand. Or all 4 hands in your case. Think about that. Peter left the room. Behind him, he could hear the Valdrin delegation speaking rapidly in their own language. The translator devices were turned off, but he didn't need translation to understand. They were angry. Within 6 hours, the Valdrin delegation left Earth. Their ships departed the solar system without any formal goodbye or closing statement. Peter watched them go from the observation deck at command headquarters. General Henry Brooks stood beside him. You just started a war, you know that? Maybe, Peter said quietly. Or maybe I just showed them that humanity won't be pushed around. Either way, we need to be ready. We're already working on it, Henry replied. Every shipyard is going to full production. Every colony is being fortified. If they come back, they'll find out that laughing was the least insulting thing we can do. 3 days later, the message arrived. It was broadcast on all frequencies, meant for every human in every system to hear. The Galactic Empire gave humanity an ultimatum. Submit to Imperial authority within 7 days, or face military action. Peter Hammond appeared on every screen across human space to deliver his response. He stood at a podium with the Earth flag behind him. His message was short and clear. We tried diplomacy. We offered partnership and cooperation. The Empire chose domination instead. So be it. Humanity has faced extinction before and survived. We've overcome every challenge our own world threw at us. We've fought wars, plagues, disasters, and each time we've come back stronger. The Galactic Empire thinks we're primitive. They think we'll surrender at the first show of force. They're wrong. We're ready for whatever comes next. And when this is over, the galaxy will know that humanity bows to no one. The message ended. Across human space, in every colony and station and ship, people prepared for war. They didn't know if they could win. They didn't know how many would die. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. They would rather fight and lose than surrender and live as slaves. The countdown to war had begun. High Admiral Zelthor had commanded fleets for 40 years. He had conquered 16 star systems and brought 12 species under Imperial control. When he received orders to subjugate humanity, he barely looked at the mission briefing. It was just another primitive species that needed to learn its place in the galaxy. His fleet consisted of 200 warships. The smallest vessel was larger than anything humanity had ever built. The largest, his flagship called the Eternal Glory, could destroy a city from orbit with a single shot. This kind of force had never failed to achieve victory. How long until we reach the human home system? Zelthor asked his navigation officer. 4 days at current speed, Admiral. Good. Send a message to all ships. Standard subjugation protocol. We destroy their military installations first, then their orbital infrastructure. Once they see their defenses burning, they'll surrender. They always do. Commander Vren, his second-in-command, studied the intelligence reports on humanity. Something about them bothered him. Admiral, the humans have been preparing for this. Our scouts report increased military activity throughout their system. Let them prepare, Zelthor said dismissively. It won't matter. They're still using primitive kinetic weapons and chemical rockets. Our shields will stop anything they throw at us. What Zelthor didn't know was that every piece of intelligence about human weapons was deliberately outdated. For 6 months, humanity had been hiding their true capabilities. They wanted the Empire to underestimate them. They wanted the Empire to be confident, because confident enemies make mistakes. Captain Nicole Perry stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Defiant. Her ship looked unremarkable from the outside. Sensors showed it as a light cruiser, similar to dozens of other human vessels scattered around Earth orbit. But the Defiant was actually humanity's first true warship, packed with weapons the Empire had never encountered. "Status report," Nicole said calmly. Lieutenant Jake Morrison checked his tactical display. "All ships report ready. Weapons charged. The Imperial fleet is entering the outer system now. They'll be in weapons range in 3 hours." Nicole had reviewed the enemy fleet composition 100 times, 200 ships against humanity's defense force of 130 vessels. The numbers were bad, but numbers weren't everything. She'd learned that in the simulations. The Empire's tactics were old, predictable. They relied on overwhelming firepower and shield strength. They hadn't fought anyone who could challenge them in centuries. That was about to change. "Send the signal to all ships. Hold positions and maintain passive sensors only. Let them think we're scared." Across the solar system, human ships went dark. They stopped broadcasting. They stopped moving. To Imperial sensors, it looked like humanity had frozen in fear. Zelthor smiled when his sensor officer reported this. "See? They already know they can't win. Begin the approach. Target their orbital stations first." The Imperial fleet moved forward in perfect formation. It was textbook military procedure, the kind taught in every Imperial academy for centuries. The heavy battleships in the center, cruisers on the flanks, destroyers screening ahead. It was beautiful in its precision. It was also exactly what Nicole had hoped for. The Imperial fleet entered weapons range and opened fire. Plasma cannons lit up space with brilliant streams of superheated matter. The first targets were 3 large orbital stations around Earth. The stations' shields activated, glowing blue as they absorbed the initial barrage. "Their shields are holding longer than expected," Vren noted. "It won't matter. Keep firing." Zelthor watched as more ships joined the bombardment. The station shields flickered, then failed. The stations broke apart, debris scattering in all directions. Zelthor nodded with satisfaction. "Move to the next layer of defenses. Let's end this quickly." That's when Nicole gave the order that changed everything. "All ships execute Plan Omega. Show them what we can really do." The debris from the destroyed station suddenly came alive. What looked like wreckage was actually camouflage for weapons platforms. Hundreds of missile pods activated simultaneously. Each pod contained 20 guided missiles with nuclear warheads. The Imperial fleet's sensors went crazy. "Admiral, we're detecting massive missile launches. Thousands of projectiles incoming." Before Zelthor could respond, the missiles hit. But these weren't ordinary missiles. They were designed specifically to overwhelm Imperial point defense systems. They came in waves, each wave using different approach vectors. Some exploded early, creating electromagnetic pulses that disrupted shields. Others accelerated to incredible speeds, too fast for the slower Imperial weapons to track. The first Imperial ship to die was a destroyer on the forward screen. 6 missiles penetrated its shields and struck the hull. The nuclear explosions tore the ship apart from the inside. "Return fire," Zelthor shouted. All ships engaged the missile platforms. But the platforms were small, heavily armored, and there were hundreds of them. Destroying them all would take time. Time the Imperial fleet didn't have, because now the human ships were moving. The Defiant and 30 other vessels that had been hiding behind Earth's moon suddenly appeared. They weren't running away. They were charging directly at the Imperial fleet at full acceleration. "Captain, they're targeting our flagship," Jake reported. "Good. That's what I'm counting on." Nicole watched the tactical display with intense focus. "All weapons prepare to fire on my mark." The Defiant closed to 10,000 kilometers. Imperial plasma cannons fired, but Nicole had timed the approach perfectly. The plasma bolts passed behind them as they accelerated. "Fire!" The Defiant's main weapon was called a railgun. It used electromagnetic force to accelerate a solid metal slug to a significant fraction of light speed. The projectile had no explosives, no fuel, no electronics. It was just a chunk of tungsten moving so fast that the kinetic energy alone was devastating. The slug punched through the Eternal Glory's forward shields like they weren't there. Imperial shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. They had no defense against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The projectile tore through the hull, through multiple decks and out the other side. Everything in its path simply ceased to exist. Zelthor's bridge shook violently. Alarms screamed from every station. Damage report. Forward shields are down. Hull breach on decks 5 through 12. We've lost main power to the port weapons array. How? How did their primitive weapon penetrate our shields? Friend stared at his tactical display in horror. Admiral, they're using kinetic weapons. Our shields don't stop solid matter effectively. And those projectiles are moving at 0.2 light speed. Nothing we have can match that velocity. More human ships opened fire. Each railgun shot was perfectly aimed at critical systems. Engine sections, weapons arrays, command bridges. The humans weren't just trying to destroy ships. They were trying to disable them, to remove them from the battle efficiently. Then came the laser strikes. But these weren't normal lasers. The humans had developed nuclear-pumped gamma-ray lasers. Each shot required detonating a small nuclear device to generate the beam. It was wasteful, dangerous, and incredibly powerful. The gamma rays cut through Imperial armor like it was paper. The Imperial formation began to break apart. Ships tried to retreat to regroup, but the human vessels were faster. They'd been designed for speed and maneuverability. They darted around the larger Imperial ships, firing from unexpected angles. All ships retreat to the outer system. Zelthor finally gave the order he never thought he'd have to give. We need to regroup and reassess. But retreating meant exposing their engine sections. The humans targeted them mercilessly. Ship after ship lost propulsion and went dead in space. Nicole watched 15 Imperial vessels trying to flee. Let them go. Send the message to all human ships. Cease fire unless they show hostile intent. Jake looked at her in surprise. Captain, we could finish them. We could. But then we'd just be murderers. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to defend our home. Let them report back to their empire. Let them tell their leaders what happened here. The Battle of Earth lasted 4 hours. When it ended, 63 Imperial ships were destroyed. Another 27 were disabled and adrift. The remaining vessels retreated at maximum speed, some of them still trailing debris. Human losses were lighter than expected. 3 ships destroyed completely, 17 damaged but repairable, 274 people killed in action. Each death weighed on Nicole like a physical burden. After the battle, she walked through the Defiance corridors. She saw the crew celebrating, hugging each other, crying with relief. They had won. They had survived. But she couldn't join in the celebration. She found Jake in the observation deck, staring out at the debris field. We won, he said quietly. We actually won. We won this battle, Nicole corrected. The war is just starting. They'll come back with more ships. They'll be ready for our weapons next time. And eventually they'll overwhelm us with sheer numbers. So what do? Nicole turned away from the window. We keep fighting. We find allies. We make them pay for every system they try to take. And maybe, if we're lucky, we make them realize that conquering humanity costs more than it's worth. Across human space, people celebrated the victory. They didn't know about the larger Imperial fleet already being assembled. They didn't know. The news of the Fifth Fleet's destruction reached the Imperial capital within hours. Emperor Voshtar sat on his throne in the Grand Council chamber, surrounded by his military advisors. The holographic display showed the battle footage recovered from the few surviving ships. Every time it replayed, his anger grew stronger. Explain to me, the Emperor said with dangerous calm, how 200 ships were defeated by primitives using metal slugs and nuclear weapons. These are technologies we abandoned 10,000 years ago. General Krathven, Supreme Commander of all Imperial forces, stood at attention. He had served the Empire for 70 years. He had never experienced a defeat like this. Your Majesty, our intelligence failed us. The humans deliberately showed us outdated technology while developing weapons specifically designed to counter our defenses. Then we will adapt, Boshatar declared. Assemble the second and third fleets. 600 ships. I want overwhelming force. I want the human homeworld turned to ash. I want every colony destroyed. Make an example of them that will terrify any other species thinking of resisting Imperial authority. It will be done. Your Majesty. Krathven bowed deeply, but the problem was spreading faster than the Empire realized. Word of humanity's victory was traveling through every corner of Imperial space. On worlds that had been conquered centuries ago, people were whispering, Some were doing more than whispering. On the planet Brel, workers in a manufacturing facility stopped production. They refused to build parts for Imperial warships. When the local garrison tried to arrest the strike leaders, riots broke out. Within days, the entire planet was in rebellion. Similar uprisings started on 6 other worlds. The Empire's iron grip was weakening and everyone could feel it. In Geneva, the Unified Earth Command was meeting around the clock. The small victory had bought them time, but everyone knew it wasn't enough. They couldn't win a long war of attrition against an empire that controlled 400 star systems. General Henry Brooks addressed the assembled military leaders. Our scouts confirm it. 600 Imperial ships are gathering. They'll be here in 3 weeks. We have maybe 200 vessels that can fight, and half of those need repairs from the last battle. We need allies, said Director Lisa Chen. She ran the intelligence division and had been working on this problem since before the war started. There are species in the Empire that hate the Valdrin. They've been waiting for someone to stand up to them. We did that. Now we need to make contact. Peter Hammond, now coordinating all diplomatic efforts, nodded. I've been in communication with representatives from the Korath Confederacy. They're a group of 6 species that were forcibly integrated into the Empire 200 years ago. They want independence, but they're afraid to act alone. If we can show them we're serious about fighting, they might join us. Admiral Karen White, who commanded the Colonial Defense Forces, spoke up. What about offensive operations? We can't just sit here waiting for them to attack again. We should hit their supply lines, their bases, make them spread their forces thin. Henry looked at her thoughtfully. Guerrilla warfare. Hit-and-run attacks. It's risky. Everything is risky now, Karen replied. But if we just defend, we'll lose. We need to take the initiative. The strategy was approved. Over the next 2 weeks, humanity would launch a series of raids deep into Imperial space. The goal wasn't to conquer territory. It was to cause chaos, to make the Empire worry about protecting what they already had. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster volunteered to lead the first raid. He was young, only 31, but he'd proven himself during the Battle of Earth. His ship, the Relentless, was one of the fastest in the fleet. Your target is the Talvex system, Admiral White briefed him personally. It's a major supply hub. Destroy the depot there and you'll disrupt Imperial logistics across 3 sectors. Ryan studied the mission parameters carefully. How many defenders? 2 cruisers and maybe a dozen fighters. Nothing your team can't handle if you're fast. Fast is what we do best, ma'am. The Relentless and 5 sister ships made the jump to Talvex. They emerged from hyperspace already moving at combat speed. Ryan's crew had practiced this maneuver 100 times. They had maybe 5 minutes before the Imperial garrison could respond effectively. Target the fuel depot first, Ryan ordered. Then the supply ships. Ignore the garrison unless they get in our way. Ensign Maria Lopez, his navigator, counted down. Weapons range in 10 seconds. The human ships opened fire simultaneously. Missiles streaked toward the massive fuel depot. Each missile was programmed with specific targeting data gathered by intelligence operatives who had infiltrated the system weeks ago. The depot's defensive shields activated, but they were designed to stop ships, not the swarm of missiles coming at them. 37 missiles hit various points across the structure. The fuel storage tanks ignited. The explosion was visible from orbit. A brilliant flash of light, followed by an expanding fireball that consumed. 3 supply ships docked at the station. Imperial cruisers are launching. Fighters, reported Lieutenant Ben Clark from Tactical. How long until they reach us? 2 minutes at their current speed. Ryan checked the mission clock. They'd been in the system for 90 seconds. They needed 30 more seconds to finish the job. Target the repair facilities. Fire everything. The Relentless's railgun spoke again. Solid slugs tore through the repair station structure. Without shields, the facility had no defense. It broke apart like a toy. Imperial cruisers are charging weapons, Ben announced. They'll be in firing range in 40 seconds. Start the hyperspace sequence. All ships prepare to jump on my mark. The remaining supply ships in the system tried to flee, but there was nowhere to go. Human missiles found each one. Some exploded. Others just went dead in space, their engines destroyed. Jump drives charged and ready, Maria reported. Ryan watched the timer count down. 5 seconds. 4. 3. The first plasma bolts from the Imperial cruisers flashed past them, missing by less than a kilometer. Jump! The 6 human ships vanished into hyperspace. Behind them, the Talvex system burned. Months of supplies gone in 3 minutes. The Imperial garrison could only watch helplessly as the debris field expanded. Similar raids happened across Imperial space over the next 2 weeks. Small human strike teams hit targets and disappeared before significant forces could respond. An ammunition factory on Krell Prime, a shipyard on Ventor, communication relay stations throughout the border sectors. Each raid caused minimal casualties but maximum disruption. The Empire was forced to station defensive forces at every important installation, forces that could have been used in the attack on Earth. But the raids came at a cost. Not every team made it back. Lieutenant Commander Danny Wright's ship was destroyed during an attack on a mining facility. His entire crew of 43 people died when an Imperial battleship arrived earlier than expected. Commander Sarah Blake's vessel was badly damaged and had to be scuttled. Her crew escaped in life pods, but 12 people didn't make it to the rescue ships. Each loss hurt. The human fleet was small and every ship, every crew member mattered. But the strategy was working. The Empire was being forced to react instead of act. Peter Hammond's diplomatic efforts were finally bearing fruit. Commander Talash of the Korath Confederacy agreed to meet in person. They chose a neutral location, an abandoned mining station on the edge of Imperial space. Talash was a reptilian creature, about 6 feet tall with scales that changed color based on mood. When Peter entered the meeting room, those scales were dark green, a sign of caution. Ambassador Hammond, your species has caused quite a disturbance. Commander Talash, thank you for meeting with me. Peter sat down across from the alien. I'll be direct. We're fighting the Empire. We've won one battle and conducted successful raids, but we can't win alone. We need allies. And what do you offer in return for this alliance? Technology, military support, and freedom. When this war ends, the Korath Confederacy will be independent. No tribute, no Imperial governors, just you. Governing yourselves. Talesh's scales shifted to a lighter shade. The Empire has ruled us for 200 years. They're strong. What makes you think you can defeat them? Peter leaned forward. Because we're not trying to conquer them. We're just trying to make conquest too expensive to maintain. Every ship they send against us is a ship they can't use to control someone else. Every resource spent fighting us is a resource they don't have for keeping order. We bleed them slowly until they realize that the Empire isn't worth the cost. That could take years. Then it takes years. We're patient. We're stubborn. And we really don't like being told what to do. Talash made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. I'm beginning to understand why the Empire hates you. Very well. The Korath Confederacy will join your fight. We can provide 80 ships and knowledge of Imperial fleet movements. That's more than we hoped for. But understand this, Ambassador. If you lose, if the Empire crushes you completely, they will destroy us as well. We are trusting you with our survival. Peter met the alien's eyes. Then we'd better not lose. The alliance was formed. Within days, other species made contact. The Brel sent 50 ships. A smaller species called the Trell offered their space stations as supply bases. An underground resistance movement on the... Admiral Gregory Shaw stood in the command center deep beneath Geneva and studied the holographic display showing the approaching Imperial fleet. 600 ships, the largest military force assembled in this region of space in living memory. They would arrive at Earth in less than 48 hours. We can't win this straight fight, said Commander Sophie Blake, his second in command. She'd been with him for 15 years and always spoke her mind. Even with the Korath and Brel reinforcements, we're outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. Then we don't fight them straight, Gregory replied. He zoomed in on the solar system display. We turn our home into a weapon. The asteroid belt, the planets, even the sun itself, everything becomes part of the battlefield. The plan he proposed was radical. Instead of meeting the Imperial fleet in open space, humanity would draw them deep into the solar system. Every step of the way would be a trap. Resources would be used at maximum efficiency. Nothing would be wasted. We're going to make them pay for every kilometer they advance, Gregory told the assembled fleet commanders. By the time they reach Earth, they'll be so weakened that our final defense will break them. High Admiral Zephram commanded the Imperial fleet with absolute confidence. He'd studied the first battle carefully. The humans had used surprise and unconventional weapons to their advantage, but Zephram had 40 years of experience. He'd defeated rebel fleets, pirate armadas, and planetary defense forces. This would be no different. What's our current status? He asked his staff officers. All 600 ships are combat-ready, Admiral. We've modified our shields to better deflect kinetic weapons. Our fighters are equipped with faster engines. We've learned from Zelthor's mistakes. Good. When we enter the human system, we advance in a spread formation. No clustering that makes us vulnerable to their missiles. We'll clear the system methodically, destroying every defense platform, every ship, every installation. This time there will be no surprises. But Gregory had planned for exactly this response. He knew the Empire would adapt. He'd counted on it. The Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system near Neptune's orbit. Their sensors immediately began scanning for threats. They found dozens of human ships scattered throughout the system, but no concentrated force. They're trying to make us chase them, Zephram observed. They want to split our fleet. We won't fall for it. Maintain formation and advance to the inner system. Destroy anything that gets in our way. The fleet began its approach. They moved cautiously, scanning every asteroid, every piece of debris. It took them 6 hours to reach Uranus orbit. That's when the first trap activated. Hidden among the rocks and ice of the outer system were thousands of mines, not traditional explosives, but devices that generated powerful electromagnetic pulses. They'd been placed over the past 3 weeks by engineering teams working in spacesuits. The mines activated in waves. Powerful EMPs washed over the Imperial formation. Shields flickered and failed temporarily. Communications were disrupted. Ships lost contact with each other for precious minutes. In that chaos, human strike teams attacked. Small, fast ships darted in from unexpected angles. They fired railgun slugs at specific targets: sensor arrays, communication dishes, shield generators. They weren't trying to destroy ships, just blind and deafen them. Restore communications, Zephram shouted. His bridge crew worked frantically. By the time the Imperial fleet reorganized, they'd lost contact with 37 ships. Some were damaged. Others had just been separated from the main formation. It took 2 more hours to regroup. Continue the advance, Zephram ordered grimly, but increase scanning range. I want to know about any threats before we reach them. The fleet pressed on toward Jupiter. The gas giant's massive gravity made navigation tricky. Ships had to calculate their trajectories carefully or risk being pulled off course. Gregory had known this. He'd prepared accordingly. Activate the Jupiter platforms, he ordered. Around Jupiter's orbit, on dozens of moons and artificial stations, weapons came online. But these weren't ship-mounted weapons. They were mass drivers. Massive electromagnetic rails that could launch payloads at incredible speeds. The platforms began firing, not at the ships directly, but at calculated points in space where the ships would be. It was like shooting at where a target was going to be, not where it was. Chunks of rock and metal, each weighing several tons, accelerated to tremendous velocities. The Imperial fleet's sensors detected them, but there were hundreds of projectiles on dozens of different trajectories. Point defense systems couldn't stop them all. 3 Imperial ships were struck by the makeshift projectiles. The kinetic impacts punched through hulls and caused massive internal damage. 2 ships lost main power. 1 had to be abandoned entirely. They're using the entire system against us, Sophie Blake observed, watching the battle unfold from the command center. Every planet, every moon, every piece of rock is a potential weapon. That's what happens when you attack someone's home, Gregory replied. They know every corner, every hiding spot. The defenders always have the advantage. The Imperial fleet pushed through the Jupiter zone and entered the asteroid belt. This was the killing field Gregory had prepared most carefully. Over the past month, human mining drones had been repositioning asteroids. Not all of them, that would have been impossible, but enough to create navigational hazards throughout the belt. As the Imperial fleet advanced, they found themselves in a maze. Asteroids that should have been in one location had been moved. Safe passages that existed on their charts no longer existed. The fleet had to slow down and navigate carefully. That's when the human main battle fleet struck. Captain Nicole Perry led the attack. 130 human ships, supported by 80 Korath vessels, hit the Imperial fleet from multiple directions simultaneously. They used the asteroids as cover, appearing suddenly to fire and then vanishing back into the maze of rocks. The Imperial ships tried to maintain formation, but it was impossible. The battlefield was too chaotic. Every time they fired at a human ship, an asteroid was in the way. Every time they tried to pursue, they risked collision. This is insane, Commander Vren reported to Zephram. We can't fight effectively in this terrain. We need to pull back and regroup. No, Zephyrum slammed his fist on the command console. We've come too far. We push through to Mars orbit. Once we reach open space, we'll have the advantage. It took 8 hours of brutal fighting to cross the asteroid belt. The Imperial fleet lost 96 ships. Some were destroyed. Others were so damaged they had to retreat for repairs. The human losses were lighter. 22 ships destroyed, 37 damaged. But Zephyrum's fleet had finally reached Mars orbit. Here in open space, they could use their superior numbers effectively. The remaining 400 Imperial ships formed up, ready for the final battle. Gregory watched from Earth. This is it. Everything comes down to this moment. Activate the mirror arrays. Around Mars orbit, what looked like solar collection panels suddenly rotated. They weren't solar panels. They were mirrors, hundreds of them, each one 50 meters across. They'd been positioned over the past year, supposedly for a terraforming project. Now they served a different purpose. The mirrors rotated to precise angles, focusing sunlight into concentrated beams. The light traveled across millions of kilometers, gaining intensity. When it reached the Imperial fleet, the beams were powerful enough to melt steel. Evasive maneuvers. Zephyrum shouted as his sensors detected the incoming energy, but there was nowhere to evade. The mirrors covered too wide an area. Ships scattered in all directions, breaking formation to escape the deadly light. That's when the human and Korath fleets hit them with everything they had. Nicole led the charge. The Defiance railguns fired repeatedly, targeting the largest Imperial ships. The Korath vessels used their energy weapons to great effect, their crews fighting with the fury of 200 years of oppression. The Battle of Mars lasted 6 hours. It was brutal, desperate fighting. Ships exploded. People died. The void of space was filled with debris and bodies. When it finally ended, the Imperial fleet was broken. 237 ships destroyed. Another 73 badly damaged and fleeing the system. Only 90 Imperial vessels remained combat-capable, and they were retreating as fast as their engines could carry them. Admiral Zephyrum's flagship was among those fleeing. His bridge was in chaos. Half his crew was dead. Systems were failing throughout the ship. "We've lost," Vren said quietly. "The humans have defeated the greatest fleet the Empire has assembled in centuries." Zephyrum said nothing. He just stared at the tactical display showing the remains of his fleet scattered across space. Everything he'd believed about Imperial superiority, about the natural order of the galaxy, had been shattered. On Earth, people celebrated. They'd won. Against impossible odds, they'd actually won. But in the command center, Gregory didn't celebrate. He looked at the casualty reports. 78 human ships destroyed, 32 Korath vessels, thousands of lives lost. Was it worth it? Sophie asked quietly. Gregory was silent for a long moment. We had no choice. But every person who died defending their freedom, that weighs on me. That'll always weigh on me. Across human space, the message went out. Humanity had broken the Empire's main battle fleet. 3 weeks after the Battle of Mars, the Galactic Empire was falling apart. Not all at once, but piece by piece, like a building with cracks spreading through its foundation. Emperor Voshitar sat in his throne room, surrounded by nervous advisors. Reports came in every hour. The Brel Union had declared complete independence and was now controlling 7 systems. The Korath Confederacy had seized Imperial facilities in their territory. 19 other species were in various stages of rebellion. How did this happen? Voshitar demanded. His voice was no longer powerful and commanding. It sounded old and tired. 3 months ago, we controlled 400 systems. Now we can barely hold 300. General Krathovan stood before him looking far older than he had at the start of the war. The humans showed everyone that we could be beaten. Once that fear was gone, all the resentment, all the anger we'd suppressed for centuries, it all came flooding out. Can we regain control? Krathovan hesitated. It was a telling hesitation. Not through military force alone. We don't have enough ships. Most of our fleet is destroyed or damaged. It would take years to rebuild. Then what do you suggest? Negotiation. We need to accept that the Empire as it was is finished. We need to find a new arrangement. The Emperor looked like he'd been struck. The idea that the mighty Valdran Empire would negotiate with rebels was unthinkable. But looking at the map of losses, he had no choice. Arrange a meeting with the humans and whoever else they bring to the table. In Geneva, Peter Hammond was dealing with his own problems. Victory had brought freedom, but freedom brought complications. Every species that had rebelled against the Empire wanted something different. Some wanted complete independence. Others wanted protection from neighbors they'd been fighting with for centuries. A few wanted revenge against the Valdren. "We need a framework," Peter told the assembled representatives from 47 species. The meeting hall in Geneva had been expanded 3 times to accommodate everyone. "We can't just let the Empire collapse into chaos. That helps nobody." Ambassador Krelvin sat in the audience. The same Valdren diplomat who had come to Earth 6 months ago looked very different now. His skin was pale, almost white, a sign of stress in his species. When Peter called on him to speak, he stood slowly. "On behalf of what remains of the Imperial government, I come to offer peace. We acknowledge that the old ways of dominance and tribute are finished. We are willing to negotiate a new arrangement." There was immediate uproar. Representatives shouted in dozens of languages, the translation devices struggling to keep up. Some demanded punishment for the Valdren. Others wanted guarantees that the Empire could never rise again. Peter let them vent for a few minutes, then called for order. "I understand the anger. Believe me, I do. But we need to think practically. The Valdren still control 100 systems. They still have military forces. We can keep fighting them, or we can work together to build something better." Commander Tal-Esh of the Korath stood up. "What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador Hammond?" "A federation. Not an empire. A voluntary alliance of equals. Each species governs itself. No tribute, no forced integration. But we work together for common defense, trade, and cooperation. Any species that wants to join can join. Any species that wants to leave can leave." "And who leads this federation?" asked a representative from the Brel Union. "We all do. A council with representatives from every member species. Decisions made by consensus when possible, by majority vote when necessary. No single species has veto power." The debate went on for hours. Some species were enthusiastic. Others were skeptical. The Valdren delegation was quiet, clearly understanding that they were no longer in a position to dictate terms. Finally, after 2 days of discussion, a vote was taken. 39 species voted to join the proposed federation. 5 voted against. 3 abstained. The Valdren delegation asked for time to consult with their government before deciding. While diplomacy proceeded, the military faced its own challenges. Admiral Nicole Perry was now in charge of coordinating defense efforts across the former Imperial space. It was an enormous responsibility. She met with Admiral Gregory Shaw to discuss the situation. They were in his office, both of them exhausted from weeks of constant work. "We have 17 different conflicts happening simultaneously," Nicole reported. "Old enemies settling scores. Border disputes. Rebellions that are turning into civil wars. We don't have enough ships to police everything." "We're not policemen," Gregory replied. "We're not rebuilding the Empire with a human face. These species need to learn to resolve their own conflicts. Some of them are killing each other. Then we mediate. We offer peacekeepers if both sides agree. But we don't impose solutions by force. That's what the Empire did, and look how well that worked out." Nicole sighed. "It's messy. Building peace is always messy. War is simple. You shoot at people until one side gives up. Peace requires talking, compromising, accepting that you won't get everything you want. It's harder, but it's worth it." One of the biggest challenges was dealing with former Imperial military forces. Thousands of ships, millions of trained personnel. Some wanted to join the new federation. Others wanted to go home. A few wanted to keep fighting. Captain Ryan Foster was put in charge of a delicate mission. A Valdren battle group, 20 ships commanded by Admiral Fenvar, was refusing to stand down. They'd retreated to a remote system and were threatening to attack any ship that approached. Ryan's orders were clear. Negotiate if possible. Use force only as a last resort. His ship approached the Valdren battle group slowly. Weapons powered down as a sign of peaceful intent. He sent a communication request. After a long wait, Admiral Fenvar responded. The Valdren appeared on the view screen. He looked defiant. "I will not surrender my ships to rebels and primitives." "Admiral, the war is over," Ryan said calmly.
"The Empire as you knew it is finished."
"Your government is negotiating peace. There's no point in continuing to fight. I have served the Empire for 60 years. I will not betray everything I've fought for." Ryan understood that kind of loyalty. He'd felt it himself. "I'm not asking you to betray anything. I'm asking you to accept reality. You can't win. Even if you destroy my ship, there are 100 more behind me. You'll accomplish nothing except getting your crews killed. Fenvar was silent for a long moment. What happens to us if we surrender? You and your crews will be disarmed and returned to Valdrin space. No prisons, no trials. You'll be allowed to go home. The humans are really willing to do this? After everything we've done? We're trying to build a better future, Ryan replied. That means not repeating the mistakes of the past. Revenge doesn't help anybody. Another long silence. Finally, Fenvar nodded. Very well. We will stand down. But know this, human. If your Federation becomes another empire, if you start conquering and dominating, there will be people like me who resist. Then we'll have to make sure that doesn't happen. The Valdrin ships powered down their weapons. It was one of many small victories in the difficult work of building peace. 6 months after the war began, the Galactic Federation was officially founded. Representatives from 73 species attended the signing ceremony in Geneva. The Valdrin sent a delegation, though they remained outside the Federation as observers for now. Peter Hammond stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled representatives. 6 months ago, we were at war. Species that had never met were killing each other over principles and pride. Today, we're starting something new, something that's never been tried at this scale before. A voluntary alliance based on equality and cooperation. He paused, looking at the faces in the audience. Human, Korath, Brel, Valdrin, and dozens of others. It won't be easy. We'll disagree. We'll argue. Some of you will get frustrated and want to leave. That's fine. This Federation only works if everyone is here by choice. But I truly believe that we can build something better than what came before. Not an empire built on fear, but a community built on respect. The ceremony concluded with the signing of the Federation Charter. Each representative came forward to add their mark to the document. When Krelvan's turn came, he hesitated. Then he signed, adding the Valdrin symbol to the charter not as members, but as supporters of the principles it represented. Afterward, Peter found himself standing with Nicole and Gregory, watching the representatives mingle and talk. Former enemies were having civil conversations. Species that had been isolated for centuries were making new contacts. We did it, Nicole said quietly. We actually did it. We started it, Gregory corrected. Now comes the hard part. Making it work, Peter smiled. You know what the hardest part is? Convincing people that they can solve problems without violence. The Empire taught everyone that might makes right. We need to show them there's another way. And if we fail, Nicole asked, then we try again and again, until we get it right. Across the galaxy, the message spread. The Empire had fallen. The Federation had risen. And humanity, the species that had laughed at an ultimatum and unfolded a newspaper, had shown everyone that another future was possible. The age of empire was ending. The age of cooperation was just beginning. 1 year after the war ended, the galaxy looked very different. The Galactic Federation had grown to include 92 species. Trade routes that had been controlled by the Empire were now open to everyone. Technology was being shared freely. And for the first time in living memory, most of the galaxy was at peace. But peace required constant work. Admiral Gregory Shaw sat in his new office at Federation Defense Command. The building was on a neutral space station called Unity 1, built specifically to house the Federation government. His role had changed. He was no longer just defending Earth. He was coordinating defense efforts for nearly 100 species across thousands of light years. Commander Sophie Blake brought him the daily security briefing. We have 3 situations that need attention. First, the Brel and Trell are having a border dispute over a mining colony. Both sides are mobilizing ships. Gregory rubbed his tired eyes. Send a mediation team. Get representatives from both species to sit down and talk before this turns into shooting. Already done. Second issue, pirates have attacked a civilian transport in the Outer Rim. 7 ships well armed. They're demanding ransom for the passengers. Where's the nearest Federation patrol? 2 days away at maximum speed. Send them immediately. And put out a call to any Federation ships in that sector. Merchant vessels, colony ships, anyone who can help. We need to show that attacks on civilians won't be tolerated. Sophie made notes on her tablet. Third issue, the Valdrin have submitted a formal application to join the Federation as full members. Gregory looked up in surprise. After all this time, what changed? Their new government finally convinced the military leadership to accept it. They're ready to join as equals, not as conquerors. That's going to be controversial. A lot of species won't trust them, which is why it needs to be handled carefully. The council wants your recommendation. Gregory thought for a long moment. The Valdrin had caused so much pain, so much suffering, but they were also trying to change. Their new government had released political prisoners, opened their borders, and begun paying reparations to species they'd wronged. My recommendation is yes, with conditions. They need to continue the reforms. They need to allow independent observers to monitor their military. And they need to accept that many species will never forgive them. They'll need to earn trust slowly. I'll pass that along. On Earth, life was returning to normal. The orbital stations destroyed in the first battle had been rebuilt. The shipyards were now building civilian vessels instead of warships. People were beginning to believe that the crisis was really over. Peter Hammond walked through the streets of Geneva, enjoying the simple pleasure of being anonymous. For months, he'd been the face of human diplomacy, constantly in meetings and conferences. Today, he was just a man taking a walk. He stopped at a small cafe and ordered coffee. At the next table, a group of students were studying. He glanced at their materials and saw they were learning Galactic Standard, the common language used throughout the Federation. One of the students noticed him looking and smiled. "Are you trying to learn it too?" Peter chuckled. "I already speak it, unfortunately. It's part of my job." "What do you do?" "I work in diplomacy." The students went back to their studies, not recognizing him. Peter appreciated that. It was nice to just be a person for a while, not Ambassador Hammond or the man who helped start a war. His phone buzzed. A message from Lisa Chen. "Need you back in Geneva. The Valdrin situation requires your input." So much for his day off. Captain Nicole Perry was on the other side of the galaxy, dealing with a different kind of problem. A colony ship carrying 10,000 settlers from 3 different species had broken down in deep space. Their engines were dead and they were drifting. Her ship, still the Defiant, was the closest Federation vessel. She'd responded to the distress call immediately. "How long until we reach them?" she asked Lieutenant Jake Morrison. 4 hours at current speed. "Can they maintain life support that long?" "Barely. Their systems are failing one by one." Nicole made a decision. "Push the engines to maximum. I don't care if we burn out half the systems. We need to get there faster." The Defiant shook as the engines increased power beyond their normal limits. Engineering reported multiple alarms, but they kept pushing. 3 hours later, they reached the disabled colony ship. The rescue operation took 6 hours. Nicole's crew worked alongside settlers from all 3 species to stabilize the ship's systems and transfer the most vulnerable passengers to the Defiant. When it was done, everyone was exhausted but alive. The captain of the colony ship, a Brel named Corvus, shook Nicole's hand gratefully. "You saved my ship." "All these lives. Thank you." "That's what the Federation is for," Nicole replied. "We help each other." It was a simple statement, but it meant everything. This was what they'd fought for. Not conquest. Not glory. Just the ability to help people who needed help, regardless of what species they were. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster had a different mission entirely. He was leading the first joint exploration mission beyond charted space. His crew included humans, Korath, Brel, and even 2 Valdrin officers. It was a symbol of the new era. Former enemies working together to discover what lay beyond the known galaxy. "Jump to hyperspace in 10 seconds, announced Ensign Maria Lopez. Ryan looked around the bridge. Every station was manned by someone from a different species. A year ago, this would have been impossible. Now it felt natural. They emerged from hyperspace in a completely unexplored system. Sensors immediately began scanning. 3 planets, one of them in the habitable zone. An asteroid belt rich with minerals, and something else. "Captain, I'm detecting structures on the 3rd planet," reported the Korath science officer, Telmar. "They appear artificial. Are they active?" "Negative. These structures are very old. Thousands of years, possibly." Ryan felt a thrill of excitement. "Prepare a landing team. Let's find out who built them." The discovery of the ancient ruins was the first of many. As Federation ships explored further, they found evidence of old civilizations throughout the galaxy. Some had destroyed themselves. Others had simply vanished. Each discovery taught them something new about the dangers and possibilities of space. Back on Unity 1, the Federation Council was in session. Peter Hammond sat among 92 other representatives, each one speaking for their species. They were debating a proposal to establish a joint scientific research program. The discussions were heated. Some species wanted to keep their technology secret. Others argued that sharing knowledge would benefit everyone. It was democracy in action, messy, loud, and slow. But it worked. Ambassador Krelvan, now representing the Valdren as observers, waited for his turn to speak. When it came, he stood slowly. I have listened to this debate for 3 hours. I have heard concerns about sharing technology, about one species gaining advantage over others. These are the same concerns that led the Empire to hoard knowledge, to control information, to keep other species dependent. He paused, looking around the chamber. We were wrong. Controlling knowledge didn't make us stronger. It made us fearful. It made us tyrants. The humans taught us that sharing makes everyone stronger. I support this proposal. The vote was called. The research program passed with 78 votes in favor, 12 against, and 2 abstentions. After the session, Peter found Krelvan in one of the station's observation decks. The Valdren was staring out at the stars. That was a good speech, Peter said. Krelvan's skin shifted to a lighter blue, a sign of sadness. It doesn't undo the harm we caused. Thousands of years of oppression, millions of lives ruined. No, it doesn't, but it's a start. Change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small steps, day after day, year after year. How do you forgive us? After we tried to destroy you? Peter considered the question carefully. I don't speak for all of humanity. Some people will never forgive. That's their right, but for me personally, I believe people can change. More importantly, I believe in judging people by their actions now, not just their actions in the past. The Valdren of today are trying to be better. That's what matters. Thank you, Krelvan said quietly. They stood in silence for a while, watching ships come and go from the station. Human vessels, Korath cruisers, Brel transports, Valdren freighters, all of them flying under the Federation flag. 6 months later, the Valdren were accepted as full members of the Federation. The vote was close, 52 in favor, 40 against. Many species still didn't trust them. But the Federation was built on the principle of giving everyone a chance. Admiral Gregory Shaw retired from military service. He'd served for 30 years, fought in the biggest war the galaxy had seen in centuries, and helped build the peace that followed. It was time to let someone else take the burden. At his retirement ceremony, representatives from every Federation species attended. Admiral Nicole Perry was named as his successor. In his speech, Gregory spoke about the journey they'd all taken together. 1 year ago, I stood on a battlefield surrounded by wreckage and death. I wondered if the cost had been too high. If maybe we should have just accepted the Empire's terms and avoided all the bloodshed. But looking at what we've built since then, I know we made the right choice. Not because we won the war, but because of what we did after. We chose cooperation over conquest. We chose dialogue over domination. We